In this lecture, we will begin rendering the list of posts. Thus far, we've been working with blocks that produce static content. However, rendering a list of posts should be dynamic. If a new post is added, the block should render the latest post. What if there are too many posts? Pagination is another concern. Fortunately, WordPress has a special block for addressing these dilemmas. It's called the query loop block. This block will handle grabbing posts from the database, rendering them, and adding pagination. It's an extremely flexible block. Posts can be filtered by post type, taxonomies, etc. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to an article for exploring this block's settings. For our case, we need to render the latest posts. Luckily, the default behavior of this block is to render the latest post. It'll work out of the box. Let's give it a try. In the first column, we are going to insert the query loop block. To get started, WordPress will recommend various layouts. You're more than free to explore these layouts. Our design uses a slightly different layout than the default options. Therefore, we're going to click on the Start Blank option. WordPress will prompt us to select a basic template. Let's choose the Title and Date option. After a few moments, WordPress will display a list of posts. These are real posts from our site. To get a better idea of what's going on, let's check out the list view. We've inserted a single block. However, WordPress will insert additional blocks. The query loop block is not an independent block. It should be paired with several other blocks to be fully functional. There are two blocks worth mentioning. The query loop block is the most important block. Its job is to grab posts from the database. However, it doesn't do anything with the posts. If we were to add the query loop block without additional blocks, nothing would appear on the page. The responsibility of rendering content is left to the post template block. After the query loop block grabs the post data, this data is stored in an array. The post template block will loop through the array with PHP. In the old days of WordPress, theme developers had to write the logic for the loop. With full site editing, this job can be handled by WordPress's core blocks, thus making our lives easier. For this reason, it is not necessary to create multiple post template blocks. This block is capable of always rendering the correct number of posts. Inside the post template block, we have additional blocks for rendering specific pieces of data related to the post. Before moving forward, there is an adjustment I'd like to make to the query. By default, the query loop block will grab the latest post from the database. While this seems great, there are some issues with this query. The index template will be applied to all pages. This includes search results, category posts, and single posts. As it is, the same list of posts will appear on all pages. The list of posts should be unique to each page. There's another behavior that we can take advantage of. First things first, let's talk about the concept of a query. A query can mean various things. In relation to WordPress, a query is a request for data from a database. Hence why the block is called query loop. It's a block that queries the database for posts. These posts can be looped through. Behind the scenes, WordPress will perform a query on every page. It doesn't matter what's on the page. We can be viewing the home, search, or 404 pages. A query is always performed. The query is based on the current URL. WordPress is an extremely intelligent platform. Based on the URL, WordPress will query the database for posts that should be rendered for the respective URL. For example, if we are on the home page, the query will select the latest posts. If we are on the search page, the query will select posts based on the search term, so on and so forth. This process is completely automated. The query loop block is performing a separate query. Therefore, every page request will have at least two queries, which is not ideal. Rather than letting the query loop block perform a query, we should tell it to use the query for the page. Luckily, there's an option for this exact behavior. Select the query loop block from the list. Next, we will modify the settings. Under the Settings panel, there's an option called Inherit Query from Loop. Turn this option on. By turning this option on, the query loop block will not create an additional query. Instead, it'll use WordPress's query for the page. Whatever results are generated by the page will be used by the block. There is a downside to this option. The block will not allow us to refine the query. We are completely stuck with the results by WordPress. For our case, this behavior is completely fine. Let's save our template. In the next lecture, we are going to customize the template for the query.